We'll get a note. Lovely. Okay, so I think that we've probably got most of our attendees here. So, welcome to our PsychoPy Studio launch webinar today, everybody. We're really excited to bring to you a new and improved, hopefully, version of PsychoPy for you to use in your research. Today, the goal is really just to walk you through kind of the what, the why, and the how. And then also hopefully we'll have time for some general Q&A at the end. But if you do have questions as we go through, please do use the Q&A function on your Zoom. So I'm going to stop talking now and actually hand over to John, who's going to get started with the main content of today's launch webinar. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Becca. Okay, so yes, a little bit about the background of this project, a little bit about the history, and a little bit about what's changed. First of all, credits to all of the team at Open Science Tools. This is very much a team effort, as with pretty much everything we do. There's going to be particular credit to Todd Parsons, who is going to be talking to you about this in a moment, and who actually wrote the vast majority of the code of PsychoPy Studio. But yeah, with a lot of feedback and help and discussions and many other things within the team. The original version was written by me. Back in 2002, I wrote a few little Python helper functions and put it online in a place called SourceForge that basically no one ever goes to anymore. And people started using that, and that became what is now the PsychoPy library. One of the common pain points of that was that people found it sometimes hard to install because they didn't know back in 2005 what Python really was, and they'd installed a library but they didn't know where it was and all that sort of thing. So in around 2006 we first made the PsychoPy coder as it is now. It was originally called IDE, and what that did was made an app, and it packaged Python within itself, and the app was in Python and it provided all of its dependencies, and that's what you've been basically using. Those of you, I'm assuming most of you are PsychoPy users, that's what you've been basically using for a while. And that helped people install all the dependencies and what they needed. And in 2009, I took the step of, over quite a lot of evenings and weekends, adding the builder interface so that people who didn't want to program actually could write their own experiments in the graphical interface too. And nowadays, that's what we use. Like, the team here don't very often, although we are all quite competent Python coders, we pretty much all use the builder interface for the majority of our work. That was all built using a thing called WXPython, and WXPython allowed us to create cross-platform apps. I could write the code once and it would run pretty similarly on Windows, Mac and Linux, always with some glitches. And in particular, it was quite hard to install that on Linux. Linux used to battle with WX somewhat, so that's one of the slight downsides. But it was good at the time. It was about as good as we could get at the time, and unlike other packages, we could then support multiple operating systems, which has always been our aim. It felt efficient to be putting all of that stuff in one language and with one set of dependencies. But WXPython has got a bit old. That's not where modern developers are mostly doing their work. So Todd was increasingly having to go through some hoops in order to get it to do things that we expect from modern apps. It was super slow to install and open, in case you hadn't noticed. So the thought of switching versions or something like that, or even just, I don't want to close the app because if I open it again I've got to sit with that splash screen for another 5 minutes. Okay, slight exaggeration sometimes, but it was slow. And it only supported Windows, Mac and Linux. Nowadays we have other things. We have Chromebooks, we have iPads, we have other options that people want to use. So it would be nice to be able to support other things as well. I'm going to talk a bit more about the limitations of use version later on, but let's just say that they were limited, and we think that they're better with Studio. And of course, these logos that were shiny, they look like buttons. Those were popular in about 2002. Not so popular now. Right. So maybe you'd noticed that apps have changed. If you use Visual Studio Code or Slack or Figma or any of these other things, they typically nowadays don't work in the same way that they used to. In particular, you can, with most of these apps, you can run them either in a browser or on your local desktop, and it is exactly the same. It's not just can do the same things, it looks exactly the same. So why is that? How's that worked? Well, basically, all of the cool kids are working in JavaScript and HTML and building their apps there. And a few years ago, 2013, GitHub created this thing. It was originally called Atom Shell because they had a text editor called Atom, and that became Electron. And what Electron does is allows you to take those web developed code and put them into a desktop app and have it connect to your local file system and all that kind of stuff. So suddenly we've got these things that can be written in one place and work in all of the others. As in, it's got even more portable. So now anything with a browser can actually run these apps. So that's way better. And that's, as I say, where all of the engineers are. There are a lot of people making these things that we can rely on. So Todd got to work back at just over a year ago. He started work on this. We set him off to go and work on the proof of principle, proof of concept. This was the proof of concept. Note, if you can see this, I hope you can see it just about. This is in a browser. This is Todd in his first works of recreating the builder as a web page using a toolkit called Svelte and putting it in a browser page and being able to load an experiment file to that browser page, which was kind of crazy. This is what it looks like now. Obviously, all of the buttons are now filled in, and all of the options that you're used to seeing are there. That's the code view, still in this new version. We get nice theming, better theming, easier theming than it used to be. So Todd's going to give you the full walkthrough, but just to show you what this new thing can actually look like. All of it's written from scratch. All of the interface, none of the library has changed. Which brings us on to what's not changing, the library. The library is really still the same. Since the last version, we've fixed some bugs and tweaks and things, but really the library underneath all of this is the same. It's still going to run the same Python experiments. It still needs a Python interpreter. Just because we're using JavaScript now for the interface, for the buttons and the menus, doesn't stop us using Python for the back. And it's going to be the same experiment files. It is the same experiment files. It can load the original experiment files, and the files you save here can be loaded, subject to occasionally. There was a little bug that we discovered last week that prevented this, but on the whole, when you save an experiment from Studio, it will also load up in standalone PsychoPy applications. So fully interoperable by design. And we haven't changed. So we're still scientists. We're still making software for scientists. We haven't been bought out. This isn't the beginning of us, going corporate and suddenly charging lots of money and things like that. You're not going to suddenly get a bill for using Studio. This is just us trying to make the tools better as we go. And a bit future-proofing a bit for us too. So what does this bring? Okay, I'm going to show you how fast this is. I mean, you might have gone and tried installing it as well. This is a real-time demo of me yesterday downloading this on a brand new virtual machine in Mac OS, you can see it now downloads in a few seconds. It's 260 something megabytes instead of 600 megabytes. It drags to the applications folder instantly, and now look how, for those of you who are used to that splash screen, look how long this splash screen lasts. Oh, the first time it runs, you have to accept the security stuff, but look how fast that splash screen was. Now the app is running. So this is an Electron app, and it doesn't include Python and all the dependencies. What it will do though is what you're seeing now is once you've installed the app, when you first launch it, it will go and install Python, and it can install multiple versions of Python for whatever you need. Even this, is a lot faster than the old installation process. So that has just completed installing all of the Python dependencies in the background as a virtual environment. So basically the whole lot, that video is 1 minute 18 seconds to download, install, launch, and install Python, which is, at that point you wouldn't even have downloaded original PsychoPy standalone. So this is way faster. And once you've done that once, the subsequent launches are super fast. It's also hopefully a smoother interface. These fancy new widgets, they allow us to do some things that were hard before, like dragging and dropping things. I'm sure Todd's going to show you how to drag something on the flow to a different position, for instance. So those sorts of things, even those can be improved a bit on what we've done so far, but they are possible now in a way that they weren't very easy before. There are still going to be some niggles. This is all very new. It's a small team. We've done a lot of testing, and Todd's done a lot of coding, but you will find some little bugs, and we'll get those sorted out as fast as we can. Right, brief bit about this compatibility and these version independence. So we've always had this thing that we wanted you to be able to run PsychoPy experiments from older versions, even having installed a newer version. That was somewhat limited by the fact that you still had the same Python because it came with the app, right? So you might set PsychoPy to use some version that the app Python that had been delivered with the installation didn't support that version, because it was, and that's limited us a little bit in terms of how fast we could update the versions of Python that we use, for instance. So we're still using Python 3.10 because of that. And what we can do now is install a virtual environment, a whole Python installation for whichever version of PsychoPy you want. So we know for 24.2.5 all of the dependencies that were needed, and we can install that with that version of Python. And in a future version, we can install a different version. Okay, so we're installing a whole. So each time you do use a version and select a new one, it will go off and install that version as well. Each one of these takes about a gigabyte of space. So periodically we might need to clear that cache or something. But on the whole, this is going to give you a much more resilient ability to run older versions than the one that you've currently got installed. So your lab mates can feel a little bit more confident that you can update the app. So I'm going to pass over to Todd, who's going to give you an actual walk around.
Okay, hello. I'm just going to share my screen now. System desktop capture. Right. Let's zoom out of the way. Okay, so first thing to notice is this is on Linux, and it wasn't particularly difficult to install, which has never been the case before. And if I open PsychoPy Studio, again, super fast to open. So we've got the old tips menu as usual. I think the first thing that stands out is this is still just PsychoPy. It looks much the same. You still got your components panel, you've got your flow, you've got your routines. I'm just going to open the Stroop task. Still got the README there. But yeah, it all just looks a bit kind of sleeker and smoother. You've got these nice little effects and the buttons. Um, yeah, if I compile this to a Python file, as John said, it's still the same library, writes the same code. It still looks like a PsychoPy experiment in Python. Um, we've got the runner view as well, same as usual. So you've got your alerts stand out and updates from syncing to Pavlovia. There's a lot of kind of little niceties we've added. One thing is being able to go back to Builder from Runner. So if you have something selected here, you can then click that to open it in Runner. And I think possibly the one I was certainly the most excited about adding was drag and drop. So if you want to reorder these components in this routine, you can just click, drag over, that goes red, and it reorders them. Same with flow. Let's move the instructions inside this loop. There we go, they're in. And they're out again. With loops, you can actually click and drag the arrows to move each initiator and terminator of the loop around. There's also a couple of small changes. So when you add a new loop, previously I think you just had one option and then you would choose the type of loop. Now you can choose whether it's a loop, a staircase, or interleave staircases here. Go to new loop. It opens the kind of usual parameters. Another difference is that when you add a routine, let's go add routine, new routine. Previously, it would just ask you for a name. Now we open the routine settings. So this is the same as if I'd clicked this routine settings button up here. But let's just say some routine. And a really neat little thing actually that Svelte makes possible. If I add a description here, so I know some information, routine. Apologies for my very loud keyboard. I haven't told I'm a loud typer. But if I go OK, I'll add that to the flow. When I hover over it, we can now have a nice little pop-up that tells you the information that you put in so that you can call your routines whatever you like and still have a little note to yourself telling you what the routine does. Another thing that is quite different, you've probably already seen, I've done a few things that open dialog boxes, but when you open a dialog box like this, previously that would have been a separate window. If I go to my kind of all windows view, it's actually in the builder window. So it's much harder now to do the classic thing where you have 100 windows open and you lose track of the edit thing for this component, and then you click on the main window and it bings at you because you've not closed the component. That's not really a thing anymore because it's all contained within the builder window, which is quite nice. And yeah, if I run this experiment, I'm just going to delete that routine I added. It's same as it ever was, really. Okay, here we go. That's the Stroop experiment. Just blitz through that. But yeah, that is, in a nutshell, PsychoPy Studio. So, shall I hand back to John now? Stop sharing. There we go.
Okay, 1 second. Back to here. So we can come back and open that up again, in Q&A. People can ask to see bits and bobs if you like, if you have any questions at that point. But we think this is the future of where things should be going. Importantly, one of the extra benefits that this brings is that this is JavaScript and HTML. Okay, wrapped up in an Electron shell, but the code underneath this can go on the web. We haven't done this yet, but we will put it onto Pavlovia, so you'll be able to edit your experiments for Pavlovia in Pavlovia and not need to install PsychoPy at all. If you're planning to run them online, you would be able to edit them online and just execute them there. We can't put all of the PsychoPy runtime, those Python libraries. Those still don't really work as a Chromebook or a tablet option, but the PsychoJS, the JavaScript library, works very well there, we think. And so you can use that for online studies and then build your experiments right there in Pavlovia. If you're teaching in a university class and the students have a Chromebook because they don't necessarily need a whole MacBook Pro, then this allows them still to be able to use PsychoPy. The roadmap for this, so we've already, a lot of you have downloaded and had a go with the existing Studio Beta. So that was released back in February, the 2026.1 release series. And we've so far called that standalone, we're calling stable for now, and Studio we're calling beta. 26.2, which will be out in mid-June. I'm thinking we're probably going to be using the same sort of terminology, or maybe we'll drop the stable and beta and we'll just say standalone and Studio. And at some point in the future, possibly, Feb 20. Well, that's a typo. We're not going to release 27.1 in Feb 2026. But yeah, when we release that one, possibly at some point we'll start calling standalone legacy. We're intending still to release the standalone releases for a couple of years, or a year or two, depending on how fast we think Studio matures. Is there any reason to carry on using standalone, etc.? At the moment, the rate of development looks rapid, and I would be surprised if there's any reason to install standalone in a year's time. But for now, we will keep both going just in case we come across something that people really want from standalone. How can you help? We want you to install it, give it a go. It won't conflict with standalone, so you can have your standalone build for all of your existing experiments, and you can still have Studio alongside. The preferences aren't related. They will install perfectly independently. They are two fully separate apps. Probably, I guess, in case we introduce a bug between them, it might be working on different experiments. So maybe I would say, don't edit your current study in both standalone and Studio. I would say open it in Studio and save it to a new place, or with a new name, or something along those lines. Or use version control, and then you can go back if you introduce some new issue. If you do have any bugs, report on the forum. Mention preferably that you're using standalone or Studio. Which one you're using. You may find that the error messages are hard to reach. Sometimes we're struggling to capture them. A part of this under the hood has got more complicated, to be fair. There are more parts to this, and tracking down where all the error messages might come from is a little bit trickier. So you might have to, if PsychoPy Studio is appearing not to do anything, you might want to go to the View menu, toggle Developer Tools, and then there's a console in there. Basically, this is your browser developer tools that allow you to get to the console log. So I can't do it from here. Maybe I can do it from here. View, toggle developer tools. So this is me looking at my talk, which is a web page, and I've just toggled the developer tools in this browser. So you might need to go to the console and see what errors there are. That's what I'm meaning. You could get involved with the code. We're also often now running contributor workshops to help people get involved with this part. You can still go and help supporting the PsychoPy library at that repository. The new one for Studio, and Studio then imports the library from the first repository. So this one is all about the app code, and this one is specifically about building the documentation sites. So do go and get involved with any of those. And if you're interested in how do I contribute, how do I write a pull request using Git to the PsychoPy repositories, then get in touch, because we might be able to slot you in with one of our workshops. And I think that's everything that we were sort of planning to tell you. But do you have any questions along the way? Is there anything that you'd like us to show you in the new app, or to prove that it can still do things?
Thank you, John. Thank you so much, and thank you, Todd, for all of your hard work and for the presentation. We've had quite a few Q&As coming in on the Q&A option. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. Some of those have been answered already, and some of those are currently being answered. Maybe let me see if I can pick some that might be worth that we could highlight for everybody. Let's have a look. So maybe let's go with this one that hasn't yet got an answer. We'll still type an answer so that we've got responses in the log. So this is an anonymous question. I have two questions. Firstly, I'm currently collecting data using PsychoPy standalone. If I switch to PsychoPy Studio now, will it affect the data I create? Will I have a mismatch between my old data file and my new data files? And the second part of this question is that they just installed it, super fast to open. We've had that feedback from other people here as well, which is great. I noticed that there's no separate app icon for PsychoPy Runner. Sometimes we let the students run the study only with Runner so they don't change anything in the experiment. Yeah, that's a really good reason to use Runner, since some of them don't have experience with the software. So maybe John or Todd, could one of you maybe share an answer to that, and I'll type one as well.
Yes, that's absolutely something we can add, and I think probably want to. One thing you can do is in preferences, you can choose which view opens when you open the app. But yes, that is something we want to do, is bring that back.
I don't know, Todd. Does Electron support receiving,
Oh
arguments,
yeah,
flags? It's going
yeah,
to be good then.
absolutely.
It's going to be good.
And just the question on the data mismatch, is there any likelihood of data mismatch between PsychoPy Studio and PsychoPy Standalone? Because that was the other part of the question there.
It should be no more than any other two releases. Again, the Studio is really just the kind of front end building interface. Once you get to the stage of it compiles to Python and it runs your experiment, that's using the same code that PsychoPy has always used. So, as John said, we've done changes and some bug fixes, but to the actual library, but that's no more than any other release that we have every half a year.
I think the biggest concern I would have is the opening and saving aspect. So
Yeah.
that's the part that if you save it from Studio, could that change anything? It's pretty. One key thing is do turn on use version. So importantly, do that. And yeah, I would be tempted to save it as a new file just in case you see that something has changed, but I think it would be unlikely.
Hmm.
Great, thank you. Um, so another question that's come up. Does the Studio browser version have any implications for controlling local devices like eye tracking, e.g., Biopack, etc.?
So
Uh, yeah, the packaged Electron app. Again, all of that kind of stuff, talking to eye trackers, talking to EG, that is done through Python. Um, so again, Studio should behave fairly similarly to the existing standalone app, unless you mean possibly in future because this is a web page. We could and are kind of hoping to put it online so that it can be run in a browser. Then you might have any kind of browser version of this would have limitations on its functionality because ultimately you can't, it's Python, and your browser doesn't have Python in it. So it would be more like a PsychoPy experiment editor if we were to put something in the browser. So then that would very much be the case. But currently, Studio again should be mostly the same as standalone because it's making the same calls to the same library, just doing it via a different interface.
Great, thank you, Todd. Um, okay, we've got another one. Oop. Uh, okay, so we've got another question. We've got users that write their entire experiments in Conda environment. They don't use any CyclePy GUIs at all. They just use pip install CyclePy and write their code. Should I warn them this may go away from that?
Uh,
Won't, it won't impact you.
I think
no, no.
this is an improvement from that perspective. Well, I suppose one issue with Conda. No, if you're going to use it just from Conda, then you can use it just from Conda. But the thing that's the advantage here is that because CyclePy is now installing genuine virtual environments rather than just the bundled Python that's inside the app, and particularly in Mac, that was then hard to use from outside the app. Whereas these are just genuine virtual environments of Python that you can use from anywhere. So you could go and activate that virtual environment and it's ready to go. So it should be easier for people who are using this to go ahead and combine those workflows. You could install CyclePy using the new Studio, but then you could use it from somewhere else by triggering that virtual environment. So that's one part. The other question is the library going to change in any way? If you don't touch the app in any way, shape, or form, that's still fine. You will just carry on using pip install CyclePy and it will be exactly as before. Slight change that's happened now, I guess, is that when you used to do pip install CyclePy, you used to get the app with it, and that won't be the case anymore. But and for the next couple of years, we will keep maintaining the app code in another. You can do pip install CyclePy -app, and you will get the legacy Python app back that way. But eventually, we'll probably drop that. I can't think of a reason to use Conda Python to install the PsychoPy app, though. I can't honestly think of why that would be a good thing to do.
If it's okay with you, John and Todd, I'm going to let you type a short summary of that answer in there, if that's okay, because I started typing and then I started missing key details that I don't want to be missed in the log. So if you could possibly write a little summary of that in answer to Mark, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so we've got a question that will be important to everyone in terms of, are there any obvious bugs in the current PsychoPy Studio build that maybe we want to keep an eye out for, bug fix releases in order to fix those?
Yes, I mean we've put in bug fixes since the last release. Actually, if you go on to GitHub and look up the PsychoPy-Studio repo, any pull request that starts with BF is going to be us fixing bugs. I'm trying to think which one's going to be the most likely to look out for. I think there is an issue at the moment. I think, John, you may have fixed it already with a plugin window that was actually to do with loading.
That's actually something
The,
that I've discovered that is going to be affecting standalone as well. That's to do with the move of the documentation sites. So right now, if you try to fetch the plugins window, it will not report the plugins correctly, which is a bit annoying. But that should be fixed in the next 24 hours or so.
Perhaps just a couple, if I may, just to flag, because I know there's some people here that were in our workshops the last few weeks. So some things that we encountered in our workshops that might affect you if you install the current release include interacting with Pavlovia. So if you're running experiments online, some people were able to do that perfectly fine. Some people with specific setups did have difficulty with syncing their experiments to Pavlovia, but those should be ironed out soon. If you're just running local experiments, that's not going to affect you. And the other one was for monitor center. So I know that someone here asked the questions about using
yes.
photometers, gamma correction, things like that. We did notice that adding new monitors and things like that was something that wasn't quite how we wanted it in the current studio release. So that's going to be fixed soon. Is that fair to say, Todd?
Yes, absolutely. That is uh, the fix for that. I've already pulled into the development branch, so that should very much be in 2026.2.
Or possibly in a bug fix release 26 point
Possibly, yes.
26.1.4.
And actually, that question leads perfectly into the next one, which was, could you do an introduction to the plugin system and how it may have changed? Are there new plugin requirements, any plugin development resources? So I guess this also speaks to if you're someone maybe developing a plugin, is do you need to do it in a different way for PsychoPy Studio?
Yes. I think there was one thing, and that is the icon of your plugin on the components panel. Um, because PsychoPy Studio is a web page, we can display the icons as SVG files, which is great because they're size independent and we can change the colors with the theme that the user's chosen. Um, I'm actually currently working on some documentation on how to do that. Not released it just yet. The long and the short of it is basically you need to have an SVG icon rather than a PNG icon for each theme. But if you don't, plugins will still work. They just will have the kind of generic component icon rather than the one that you would have had in the previous release.
Lovely. Thanks, Todd. And maybe if you could just type that when you have a moment in the
Yeah, sure.
response here. But I can also see that you're currently answering Thomas's question about, I love the new PsychoPy Studio. Thank you. And I tried opening an old experiment, but the flow vanished. I think that Todd's going to respond to you there directly. But as with anyone trying PsychoPy Studio, which thank you if you're already downloading it and testing it, please keep in touch with us on the forum. Let us know as we go. Your feedback is what helps make these things a lot better. So thank you. I think Todd's going to answer that one.
Yeah,
And
I mean, that's all I was going to say was, yeah, that sounds like a bug for sure.
let us know.
Yeah, if you report it on either GitHub or on the forum, and if
Upload
possible, if you could
upload the
attach the
experiment
SciEx,
file. Yeah.
yeah, then we can open it and see what's going on.
Yeah, actually, I can chip in on that as well because I've had that, and that's it happens when you there's something in the SciEx file which isn't recognized by Studio, and so it's loading the SciEx file. It comes across something that it can't understand, and then it stops. And the flow is at the bottom of the SciEx file, so it therefore stops before it loads the flow. So I have
Right.
fixed this before by identifying the thing that was problematic, deleting that, and then the flow came back by opening the SciEx file in a text editor.
Ah, cool.
Um, Thank you, Wakefield. Okay, so we've got, let me just see what has been answered and what hasn't been answered. Loads of questions coming in. Thank you, everybody. Okay, what have we got next? We've got someone who joined late. Apologies if this concern is already addressed. Do not worry. I'd appreciate it if you could tell me whether you think there'd be any problem running an experiment programmed in 2023.2.3 on PsychoPy Studio. I upgraded it once to 2025 and my experiment crashed. This is a story we've heard before. Don't worry, you're not alone. Um, though I don't remember what the error was now. So I downgraded back to 2023. Everything works great with 2023.2.3, but I'm concerned that if I switch to PsychoPy Studio, my experiment will crash.
I would say again, you know, duplicate that folder, give it a go, but duplicate the folder. Don't save back over your original experiment. Have a look and see if it opens and works. If it opens and you see your flow, and then you try to run it, there won't be sort of like subtle differences in the timing of the experiment, that sort of thing. That shouldn't be a problem because again, it's using the same engine underneath. All that's changed is the stuff that's interfacing, the way of manipulating your experiment. So if you don't change your experiment, it will be running exactly the same as before. In terms of why did it fail last time, that's partly I suspect. I mean, certainly if you've got any plugins involved, one of the things that could happen, for instance, is that a plugin worked with one version, you've upgraded PsychoPy, but the plugin needed changing, or the new version of the plugin wasn't compatible with the old version, etc. And again, this is something that should be better with the Studio version because it can replicate a full virtual Python environment. So I think this will have improved, not got worse. And you should find it will work. But I would say copy at least the experiment file to a new one before opening it, and then just making sure that it does work and it does look the way you're expecting.
Um, I'm going to pick on the next question because I know there's a few for us to get through, but I love this question from anonymous attendee. Are we planning to add any kind of layout view to Studio that makes it easier to place components on the screen? Because this is a common question. What's the
Uh,
answer?
I have dreamed of such a thing for so long. Yes, we really do want to do something like that. And one of the main things holding us back was the limitations of building that interface in WX. Yes, it would. It's
And we've been
um,
we've been planning this move to sort of JavaScript based interface for a while. We didn't want to go and start building new features just before porting to this new app method. Now we've got that out the way, largely, I think we can go ahead and start working on those things. And yes, it would be. We agree it would be useful. We will start that work soon.
Um, that's something I'm sure lots of people will be excited to hear. Um, okay, so any changes related to the rendering of fonts in Studio, especially non-English fonts? So this is a question also that's popular. Um, I had experienced issues while showing two different fonts in the same routine.
this is fonts in a text box component, I'm guessing. No, basically, that is something that's on the library end. So, I mean, we are always trying to fix stuff on the library end, and I think I do remember doing a fix to, I think it was how Arabic characters are rendered. But it's not really related to the switch from standalone to studio. That's just from PsychoPy this version to this version. So basically, we are improving rendering of text stimuli, but it's kind of separate to studio.
Lovely, thank you. Just writing a response there. Okay, will future workshops be using PsychoPy Studio for all the demos?
That's what we
We
do.
hope so. We hope so. We've tried to do that so far. So we've done some departmental workshops already, all in PsychoPy Studio. We also ran our 4-day workshop a couple of weeks ago using PsychoPy Studio. We hit some bumps when it came to interacting with Pavlovia, which meant that we shifted back to standalone at the time. So I know there's some people in this webinar today who were at that workshop, so you know firsthand what I mean there. So the hope is that yes, that will be the case, and we're also ironing out things that will make that possible in the near future. Um, just having a look if there's anything that we have missed. Apple warns me that this version of standalone PsychoPy will not open in future versions of Mac. Is that going to be a problem with standalone Mac users, or will
Right.
Studio avoid this problem?
Um, two parts to that. Ultimately, this summer, we hope we will be releasing standalone in a version. This is about Intel versus ARM chips. If you've heard about M1, M2, M3, those are the ARM chips. Basically, so far we've been supporting those newer chips using an emulator mode called Rosetta in macOS, and that's being dropped. By soon, it's not being dropped actually immediately, but in the future. I think that's scheduled to be dropped from new versions of macOS in a year and a half's time. But it's all good. So we were waiting for a couple of dependency libraries to support the new ARM architecture, and that's why we've had to use the emulated mode. We have got all of that sorted. We should be fine from this summer. So 2026.2 release, we should support native Mac Silicon or ARM chips or M1 chips. They always have so many different labels for this. Why can't we just have one label? Anyway, those chips we should be supporting by 2026.2.0, and should be no problem from then onwards. And again, this nice thing with Studio will allow us to deploy to either type of Python. It will work just fine.
Lovely, thank you. Um, Another one that's popped up. I'm not sure if this is already the default behavior during installation on Windows, but if not, it would be important to allow Studio to install per user account on the basis a standalone does. We have shared machines where each user has a login. Actually, this might relate to a request that you had recently, I guess,
Yeah,
about installing.
we've been talking to some IT administrators at universities trying to get a feel for how universities handle when you've got a lab that's got say 50 computers, how you install PsychoPy and what we can do to make that easier. Currently, Studio does install on a per user basis, and the Python environments that it creates in a user folder. On Windows, I think it's app data slash, with the percentage signs. Um, so that is the environments are user specific. Actually,
Actually,
in the
one
next,
second though, the Python environment is a bit more complicated. The Python environment
yeah.
is user specific. CircuitPy Studio is going to program files.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
So um, the question mark for Classroom installs is whether we can send the Python environments to some shared space as well. I can't remember what happens in terms of the installer on Windows, whether you can select it to go to. If you're not admin and you run the installer, that's for someone to quickly go and check. What happens if you install Studio not as an admin? Can you still install it to your own files? I don't know the answer, is actually the truth.
preferences in the app are user specific though. So even if the app is installed to program files, if
Yeah.
a different user opens it, they will get different preferences and everything because that's all stored in the app data folder. What we're hoping to do soon is add an option for when you first open it to basically choose where the Python environments get created. The reason being, if you're on a uni machine that has like 50 different people using it over the course of a week, you don't want to make 50 different Python environments because that's like 50 gigabytes on your hard drive that's now gone. So what this upcoming option will allow you to do is say put these in a machine level, a system level folder, so that one person logs on, they create an environment for 2026.1.3, and then another user logs on and they'll get the same environment rather than making a new one.
Okay, I think this is maybe going to be the last question that I share here, if that's okay, just because there's lots of questions coming in, which is great. Thank you, everyone. We've had 32 questions in total, and also we had about 85 people in the webinar today, which is great. Um, just to flag, and I think I know the answer to this one actually, Todd. So lots of people installing Studio right now and testing and reporting back things that they're encountering. This is great. Please let us know on the forum. One thing that did pop up said, I'm testing the app on Mac. When I try and add a loop, the app displays loading loops and goes nowhere from here. Is this a bug or am I doing something wrong? Thanks a lot. I think the answer to this one, Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, is similar to the loading components that you might see when you first install the app. So it might literally just be that you need to give it a little time and then restart the app. And then you should see the loop properties. Am I right there, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, the timeline of events is essentially Studio opens, then Studio installs, sets up, and starts Python. And then it imports PsychoPy, the Python module. And then it asks PsychoPy what components are there, what loops are there, and then it displays those. So when it's saying when it's saying fetching loops or loading loops, it's basically it's got as far as asking PsychoPy. Now, if something's gone wrong setting up the Python environment, that could cause it to just sit there forever, or it could have be that it's just started up and it's doing some configuration. It's going to take a little while. It might be the case that if you restart the app, that will, maybe it set up, something went wrong starting it, but then when you open it again, it doesn't do that. I have seen that before.
Um,
And Marcus, I have seen your comments about issues that you encountered with Studio while working on the iLink plugin. We will get to those, but yeah, mostly those are things that we know about, and they should be relatively minor to fix. I'm just going to click answer live to that one.
Okay. I realized that I said that was going to be the last question that I share here, but Thomas asked a very important question, which is where are the PsychoPy Studio stickers? And the answer to that is we've actually, following the rebrand, got new merch coming, which is very cool. We'll actually be at APS in Barcelona next
Gary
to the end of the month. So if anyone is at APS in Barcelona, come and say hi to me and Kim, please, and come and get your PsychoPy merch. Hopefully the studio merch arrives by then. And socks. I don't know if we'll have any of those at the booth, but we should get some available on Redbubble or something. We'll be on it, Gary. Don't worry. Very important developments here. And how do we get merch all the way to Malaysia? Oh well, I'm sure we could sort something out soon, Lynn. Okay, so thank you so much, everybody, for your attention and your interest. Thank you to Todd for all of your work on, this huge transition and rebuild. Thanks to John for creating PsychoPy. We all like it. Thanks, and for the information today. Everyone, please keep testing. Keep in touch on the forum. Let us know how you get on, and hopefully, PsychoPy Studio fulfills all of your dreams moving forward.
We will continue answering those other remaining questions that are there. We'll type in answers to the rest. So if your question, I see there's one about translation there. We'll type those in, and so you will get an answer in the end. And we'll put this online soon.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording there just so that YouTube people don't just see us floating at the end. Right.